Hi again everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited about today's video. It's one of my favorite war stories because it takes me back to a time where, pressure was high and results were an absolute must. So through my lessons learned, you'll be able to walk away with an understanding of the mindset that we took on at Rocket Internet in order to build successful ventures at scale. This insight should enable you to build sustainable processes of your own in the context of your singular, unique venture, allowing you to launch fast, but also not to compromise your future outlook as you build for the long term. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So it was back in 2014, right after Rocket Internet's IPO, that I got a call from our CEO. He tells me very bluntly and in plain terms that he wants 50 companies, 50 companies churned out per year. So that's around 4 per month, right? And he said that we needed to make a statement. This was the way to do it. And here's the fun part. He tells me that I'm the lucky guy in charge of making it happen. Now, to be honest with you, at that moment, I didn't feel very lucky at all. 50 companies and successful ones at that, people break their backs just trying to build one over the course of a lifetime. So 50 on the timeline of only a year was ambitious, to say the least. But of course, I say what anybody says to a CEO when, they ask for something, and I told him, you got it. And after hanging up, I began processing the situation at hand. And importantly, I was given no additional hires. So this meant I had the manpower of about 60 people that I already had. So now up until this point, we'd been launching one company every 8 months, right? And that's a gear shift to about 4 per month, right? So going from 1/8 of a company to 4 per month is a 32x increase in output. So that was wild. So a gear shift to 4 companies per month just seemed, completely unachievable relative to what we had. And I felt like I was hit with a brick, to be honest. So what I did was I conferred with the other C-levels before doing anything else. Gladly, the CEO's moon launch was brought back to earth a bit, at least a bit. So we agreed on doing 1 to 2 ventures per month over the course of a year. So about 20 in the course of a year. There was still plenty of reworking to be done, but this was a goal I felt that I could handle. Ambitious, but achievable. I immediately simplified the task at hand. The task being how to create a lean and scalable process. A process that is repeatable so that it can be automated and perfected. And a process that is lean so that it achieves the maximum output in the shortest amount of time. And a process that works was the bottom line that we were dealing with. So this was the mindset that created the 100-day launch process. About 14 weeks to push a company out and to have that company experience the same success as its predecessor and as its successor. So I started by looking at the bigger picture, the venture as a whole. And then I broke it down the only way I knew how, by function. Function meaning team or, functions like marketing, sales, operations, tech, product, design, HR, finance, legal, customer care, etc. So these functions were the pieces that comprised the whole. And my first touch point had to be with those who built these pieces, the functional leads. So lucky for me, we were all in the same building. And I talked to everybody involved in the venture building process. The CMO, CFO, General Counsel, VP of PR, everybody. I dug deep and squeezed out every minuscule step that they undertook in building out their respective function to launch. Now, I don't remember the exact number, but after 3 weeks, I think I was left with about 370 steps in front of me. And I said to myself, 370 is way too much to handle. I need a nicer, rounder number. More than that, I needed a number that could be executed on within 100 days. So I began to cut down with an aim of achieving 100 steps. 100 days for 100 steps had a nice ring to it. This was surprisingly pretty easy the first go around, because some steps were highly personalized and were more nuanced to the person building the process, rather than the minimum output that needed to be achieved in general. Now the second batch of cut downs, and those after, continually got tougher and tougher. But I took a lean MVP approach to it, which means that I questioned necessity at every step of the way. In other words, was this a must-have? Would the company flop without it? Or was this a nice-to-have, meaning that the company's prettier, easier, slightly better off without it, but just slightly? So this is what allowed me to key in on the 100 steps and only those 100 steps. And with these steps in front of me, I began to take on the tough task of sequencing them, of defining the order. What was step 1 and what was step 100? And I did this using the overarching philosophy of dependencies. For example, take a legal entity and a bank account. You absolutely need those things super early because many things depend on them. Employment contracts, receiving funding, and receiving revenues, of course, paying salaries, paying bills. So the more other steps depended on a step, the earlier that step should happen. So the more dependencies a step had, the earlier that step should happen. So it was a way of working backwards that lent itself towards building a timeline. And now with the sequence in order, I looked at all external dependencies with a microscope. External, of course, being different from internal in the way that, for instance, setting up a bank account would be dependent on the financial entities, right? External. An internal dependency would be our ideation process, for example. So we took all external dependencies, placed them on an island, and said to ourselves, now how do we reduce the lag time of these as much as possible? It was simple conceptually, and so what we did is we built partnerships with all the firms and entities that were causing these lag times. For example, we partnered with an international bank that allowed us to open up a bank account in any country in less than 3 days. We partnered with another company that provided us with a shelf company, within a moment's notice. And we did many more things like that. So 3 weeks after fleshing out the process, we got our first assignment, the pilot company. It was definitely a huge learning curve. We worked nights and weekends and to just barely get it out under the 100-day mark or, just on time. Even when we did a few things, that were sloppy and had to retroactively be done, but it was okay. Those were just nice to haves. We got all the must-haves done in 100 days. That's what mattered. But, so we always met the 100-day mark. So we repeated this fine-tuning process through companies 2 and company 3, and the learning curve gradually began to flatten out. The nights and weekends gradually phased out, thankfully, and we fell into a rhythm where we met the 100-day timeline comfortably. I mean, once we even launched a company in a mere, 28 days. That was an emergency situation. So my closing conversations with the co-founders of each venture was, pretty much the same. And there's an important sentiment that I'd like to pass on to you while I have you here watching. You need to focus only on what's launch critical, not on what's nice to have. This is do or die in the early days. And you gotta launch quickly and you gotta minimize costs. With this mantra instilled into each founder and my newly built 100-day launch process in place, with that we launched over 20 companies in the course of the year. We did it in an assembly line fashion, and through it all we realized that there was indeed a blueprint to venture building. So as a founder going through your own building challenges, I encourage you to take a step back and to see the bigger picture. So retroactively lay scalable foundations for the big money and big time resource intensive processes that are already in place in your venture. And do so preemptively for each new process like that to come. This is a game changer. It will allow you to meet the demands of growth, of scale, when the time comes. Not only that, it will often be the underlying factor that leads you to growth in the first place, actually. Right, so that's all from me now. I hope you were able to find actionable takeaways from my own experience. And remember, if you enjoyed the content, please subscribe to the channel by clicking the button below so that you don't miss the many more war stories and venture building resources that I'm excited to keep sharing with you.